Chapter 2 of beginning verse 14. Do everything. Do everything. Do everything. I know I sound like a record that's skipping. I'm sorry, you guys don't know what records are. Have your parents tell you about it. But do everything. I mean, I stumble on this point every time I read it. I've been, a Christian for 30 years now, and I still struggle with this do everything about what I'm fixing to talk about without complaining or arguing. Everything. Surely, Paul, you don't mean everything. Surely you're using hyperbole here. But he says do everything without complaining or arguing. Why? So that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault, in a crooked and depraved generation, in which us, we shine like stars in a dark universe as you hold out the word of life, in order that I may boast on the day of Christ that I did not run or labor for nothing, but even if I am being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I'm glad. I rejoice with all of you. So you too should be glad and rejoice with me. Bob Russell is the pastor, well, he's retired pastor now from Southeast Christian Church in Louisville, Kentucky. And he's one of my favorite preachers, but now he's retired. But Vera, I think she likes him better than me. No, I know she does, and rightly so, because he's just a wonderful, gifted man of God. And anyhow, Vera, it was amazing. I've had this lesson already, and then on the way home from Indiana yesterday, Vera starts talking about this lesson that she's been listening to by Bob Russell. And I said, well, that's amazing, because that's exactly what my sermon's on today. And anyhow, in this sermon, Bob Russell has a guy come up and give a testimony. And this guy that was speaking was a low-down scoundrel. Matter of fact, I can use the word jerk here, right? He's a self-proclaimed jerk. And anyhow, he and his buddies would sit on the front porch and they would drink beer, and they had a neighbor who was really kind of to himself and quiet. And they would sit on the front porch and they'd make fun of him. And he knew that they were making fun of him. And they did this on a regular basis. But every time the guy walked by, he waved, always had a sincere smile, said hi. Well, this self-proclaimed jerk, he worked at a school, and he was lowering down a shade, or not a shade, one of those screen things there, and the screen came down on top of him. He put his arm up and he broke his arm. And, he's got a big old cast on his arm, and he couldn't mow his lawn. And so the neighbor saw that, and he got his lawnmower and he came over and started mowing the guy's lawn. The guy said, "What in the blankety blank are you doing out there mowing my lawn? Get out of my lawn." He goes, "No, I just want to mow your lawn." And so he did. He mowed his lawn. And every time this guy came against him about mowing his lawn. And then after about the third week, he came to the guy and he said, "Well, I'm not going to be able to be here next week, so I'm not going to be able to mow your lawn." The guy said, "Well, good. I didn't want you mowing my lawn anyhow, And so the following week, this other guy shows up. He looks out the window. Somebody's mowing his lawn. He goes out and he grabs him literally by the arm and says, "What in the blankety blank are you doing mowing my lawn?" He said, "Well, my dad couldn't be here this week, so he said you needed your lawn mowed, so I came over to help mow your lawn." And so, this went on until a point where this guy finally had a friend who sent him a book by Max Lucado. And the guy said, "Just read this book." And he read the book by Max Lucado, and to make a long story short, the guy came to faith in Jesus Christ, and he realized, he went back over to this neighbor and he said, "I know why, you've been mowing my lawn." He said, "You've been mowing my lawn because you're a Christian." And they both just started crying and hugging each other. And the guy said, the self-proclaimed jerk, he said, "That's exactly what I was. Without Christ, I'm a jerk." And so the fact is that this authentic light that came out of this Christian man in the darkest of times guided this man to faith in Jesus Christ. And so when we talk about, that we're supposed to be the light of the world, matter of fact, when Jesus says it, You're to be the light of the world. This is what he's talking about. This authentic light that in the darkest of times, the light shines the brightest. And so, it's dark in here now. And look at that light. It's just a little tiny light. But I'm holding this light and I can guide you places. I can guide you to safety. It can bring you comfort. Right? The dark, but you look around and it's amazing. As soon as those lights went out, the big lights, all the little bitty lights in this room now become very clear to us and very focused. Even this little tiny one, which is now huge. But now turn the lights back on. Please. How influential is this light now? It just blends in. That's the difference between us being out in the world and being the light in the dark place, and us all being together while the light's all gathered. There's not a whole lot of influence with the light now, because all of our lights join together. The great distinction is when we're in the dark place. So I want to look at the fact that light creates a contrast. Next slide. Oh, got to get the big idea out first. The big idea is that we must be light in a dark place to rescue those who are perishing. We need to be a light in the dark place so that we can rescue those who are perishing. That's exactly what Paul's talking about here in Philippians chapter 2. Being the light isn't just about coming to church and doing some religious thing for, an hour and a half or whatever, how long it takes. It's for a purpose. Where does this light come from? The source of this light for us as children of God is His Spirit. And in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, in verse 18, I really have to set the whole scene up for you, okay? How many of you guys remember the scene where Moses is coming down off the mountain, with the 10 Commandments? You've all seen Charlton Heston, right? Coming down out of there with that nice white hair and a long robe. Well, when he was coming down from the mountain and he had been in the presence of God, his face was shooting out light. It was so bright that they had to veil his face. Is that right? Yes. Well, kind of, sort of. See, what happened when Moses was off the mountain, the bright light from his face began to fade. And they didn't want to see the glory of God fading in him, so they veiled his face because his glory was fading. He says, not so with you. Not so with me. That with Christ we have an ever-increasing glory with unveiled faces. The longer you're walking with the Lord and the closer you're with the Lord, the brighter that light should be. Right? Ever-increasing glory. And so he says in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18, he says, and we, with unveiled faces, we all reflect the Lord's glory and are being transformed into His likeness with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is His Spirit. Now, I got to tell you, I grew up in a religious tradition that really didn't talk a whole lot about the Spirit and the transformational aspect of the Spirit, how it makes us different. Until I went to this thing called Promise Keepers back in the middle of the 90s. And I, in a very wonderful and overwhelming way, was introduced to this Holy Spirit in a very experiential manner. I'm in the dome, whatever that thing is, Silver Dome, up there in Pontiac. And there's 72,000 other guys. And we're all holding hands together singing, holy, holy, holy is the Lord. And I remember that transformational, that experiential part of the Holy Spirit. I felt like I was Moses come down off the mountain.